What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. We are back doing another preview video. This one is going to be for England versus Australia. This is where we chuck on a game of Rugby 20 in the background so you guys have something fun to watch, while over the top we talk about the official teams announced, who we think is going to do well, who we think is going to do badly, try and work out some game plans, and finally give a overall score prediction for what we think will happen in the real life game. England versus Australia is always a big game, so there's a lot to talk about, so let's get this game kicked off and underway. Alrighty, George Ford will get us kicked off. We'll go nice and left, play a little bit shorter this time, try and mix it up a bit. Not that we'll be seeing George Ford anytime soon, probably in an England shirt. Eddie Jones doesn't seem to leave him in anymore. So, England versus Australia. This is a game a lot of people have been talking about leading into these autumn internationals now. Of course, there's a lot of history between these two teams, especially when you look back through things like the World Cups and so on. And both teams have gone through their fair share of issues this year. England with their sort of worst Six Nations ever. They had a better summer series. They're trying to rebuild a bit of a new team leading forward to this World Cup. Australia struggled a little bit throughout the start of the year. They struggled against a bit of a B team, France, and they've slowly begun to pick up now as they've played in their Southern Hemisphere Championship, and then moving forwards they look to play good against Scotland, but ultimately came away with a loss in that game. Seeing as we're playing as England, we'll start off by talking about England to begin with. So England last week had a pretty resounding win over Tonga. I don't think we expected a lot less, to be honest. It's a high-end team with a high-end coach and a lot of money behind them, and Tonga seem to be struggling to pretty much play anyone at the minute, which is a shame for them because they do play really exciting rugby, but they just struggled to get off the ground. Plus they had a lot of debutants and a bit of a lacklustre team for them as well, which was a bit of a shame. England came away, a lot of resounding victory there, but a couple of issues still arising. They'll definitely be working on that when they come up against a team like Australia. Can't afford to be making some of the few mistakes that we got to see in that game. So looking at the team announced for this game, let's start off in this front row. Starting off at the front then, Ellis Genge, Jamie George and Kyle Sinclair. Now Jamie George originally of course left out of the team, brought back in, and then got his 2 tries against Tonga. Kind of glad they sort of stopped there and stopped messing about with the 5-metre mauls. We know England can score a try from a 5-metre maul, and against Tonga it's not really that impressive. Against Australia it would probably be far more impressive, and it might be something we see used against this team in Australia. Kyle Sinclair will be nice to see. We really haven't seen a lot of game time from Kyle Sinclair recently, so it will be nice to see him in. Moving back towards the locks then, Itoje and Hill. Now, you know, this is a setup now Eddie Jones loves. We're seeing this a lot more often now. We saw this throughout all of the Six Nations. This is probably the main setup that he really likes doing in this 4-5 shirt. When we look further back towards the back row, there's also something that I want to bring in here. So, looking at 6, 7, 8, Courtney Laws, Sam Underhill and Curry in that 8 position. Now, personally for me, I'm not a big fan of Curry at 8. I definitely much prefer him in 7, and we certainly saw it in that game against Tonga. When he had to move to 7, took over the captaincy role, I think he had a much better game as soon as he moved to 7. They're trying to find a place now for Courtney Laws in this game. And one of the things that sticks out to me in this front 8 is, to me, Johnny Hill is a perfectly fine player, but there hasn't been anything really shining about him for me personally. What I would like to see here is have Itoje at 4, move Courtney Laws to 5, as he's very comfortable playing lock or flanker. You can move Sam Underhill back to 6, where I personally prefer him as well. Move Curry to 8, and then bring Sam Simmons in at 8. Move Curry to 7, and then move Sam Simmons in at 8, sorry. You'd have, to me, a much more impactful 1 to 8 there, especially from 4 back to 8, and I think that would work better. Or if you didn't really want that, I also don't think it would be a terrible move to put Courtney Laws on the bench, even though I rate him higher than Johnny Hill. Have Johnny Hill start and have Courtney Laws on the bench and allow him then to be a coverage sub for both lock and flanker. But Eddie Jones is putting on the team he wants to in his way. It's a bit of a shame that we don't really get to see Sam Simmons play more for England. I think he played very well in the highlights that I've seen from him in the premierships and stuff. And then in the tour he had with the Lions as well. Going out there, he's definitely scoring big points against some of the lower end teams and even some of the big teams. He had a big impact in, so hopefully we'll get to see him at some point. Moving towards the backs and the halfback partnership, this is something that people keep talking about now. We've got Ben Youngs and Smith going in here. So Marcus Smith, of course, having that great summer series going off with the Lions as well. There was a lot of talk about the combo now between Smith and Farrell, how they're going to play them both. Marcus Smith going to be taking over this role now from what was basically George Ford. And Marcus Smith playing good rugby from everything I've seen, and I'm really looking forward to just see more from him. He looked to just be very comfortable in that Tonga game, so really looking forward to see what he brings. Looking at the centre partnership, as I just mentioned, Farrell in there as captain back from his test that came back positive and then was negative, and there was a whole hoo-ha with that thing. So Farrell's back in now as captain with Slade on his 13, who I think is a very good player. I do talk quite highly of Henry Slade. And then in the back three, Johnny May, Tuilagi moving to the 14 shirt, and finally Stewart in that 15 fullback position. Now this was a weird call for me. I've never seen Tuilagi play wing. I mean, I absolutely believe he's probably capable. He's a fast man. He's a hard man to stop once he gets going. But for me, I feel like there's potentially a trick missed here. I really was quite impressed by Adam Radwin last week. I thought he had a really good game. He looks like he can really explode, and if you give him a gap, he'll come away with a try. I think it's a bit disappointing to not see Radwin. Maybe he's not so used to playing the higher end big teams like Australia. But to me, I don't really see any reason here why you couldn't have either had Tuilagi at 13, which he's played before, he plays 12 or 13, inside or outside, had Radwin on at 14, and allow him to have some game time against some of these bigger end teams, especially, moving towards a World Cup, and have Slade start on the bench. Then that way you have Henry Slade who can cover 12, 13, and also 10. You could have also had Tuilagi at 12 and just had Farrell on the bench as a 12-10 cover. And then you could have had Radwin in as well. I think potentially there's a couple of things I would change about this team. Eddie Jones has obviously done this for a reason. He doesn't do this just because he likes people. He does it because there's a game plan behind it. So I think it'll be a good move. But overall, as a 1 to 15, it's a pretty strong team. I mean, considering he's talking about hacking out 30% of his team, this is a relatively standard team, and it's a pretty good team. There's a lot of talent in here. You'd certainly be expecting them to be able to put in a good game here, especially with Australia not necessarily on top form, and a couple of issues that Scotland will have shown up of how to get around Australia. Seeing as we're talking about, or doing some subs in the background here, we'll just quickly talk about the England subs before we kick off this second half. So on the bench then, Jamie Vermeer, Bevan Rodd, who is not someone I know a lot of. I know there was a big issue with Joe Marler going out now. He's tested positive as well, so he's had to go out. So Bevan Rodd is going to come in. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. And finally, Will Stewart, who will be coming on in that second half at some point. Further back then, Charlie Ewells, Alex Dornbrandt, and Sam Simmons. So they've gone for the 6-2 split. They've obviously trying to isolate this idea of whether or not Australia are going to be able to hold up in terms of that forward pack. 6-2 just allows you to go for much longer. We know how much England love their platform, the line-out platform, the scrum platform, the ruck platform. They love using it as a way of initiating set plays. And if they can get that down, I think they'll just begin to apply pressure to this Australia team. You will have seen it in games like New Zealand versus Australia. As soon as they begin to dominate line-outs and scrums, Australia do begin to struggle a little bit with what to do. They do begin to look a little bit lost. So I don't think that's a terrible move to put them all on. Looking forward to seeing a bit more from Alex Dornbrandt. I still haven't seen a lot from him personally, but the rugby I am seeing from him is impressing me a lot. And like I've said already about Sam Simmons, looking forward to just having a bit more game time in an England shirt. Get him a bit more impact, especially looking towards Six Nations coming up soon. They'll want a better Six Nations than they had this year. So I don't think it's a bad move to get Sam Simmons on a little bit more. And finally, Raffy, Quirk, and Max Malins. Now, Raffy Quirk is not someone I know a lot about, so some people I'm sure will drop down in the comments a little bit about him. Is he good? Is he bad? Is it a great move? Is it a terrible move? So we're looking forward to see him. I'll try and keep a special eye out for him. And finally, Max Malin. So, of course, good coverage from Max Malin. He seems to just play anywhere Eddie Jones tells him to, and he does play good rugby. Like I said before, though, it's a bit of a shame to not see Adam Radwin in here. I imagine he's gone more for just having higher capped and higher experienced players, and then sort of Max Malins has a slightly larger coverage, I would imagine, than Radwin, and they wanted that 6-2 split. I imagine they're not looking for flyers. They're not looking for people like Adam Radwin to just break through gaps and run around all over the pitch. This is going to be a hard slog match. This is going to be through the forwards, through the scrums, through the lineouts, driving mauls. It's going to be all that nonsense. So it's probably going to be a little bit of a tighter game, I imagine, going on, but I'm sure it will be an exciting one. So let's talk about their opponents, Australia, coming away with that loss to Scotland, which they must be furious about. They played a really good game. I thought they came in with a bit of a weaker team than the Scotland team. I expected Scotland to win by more. Australia really impressed me. I thought they did really well, and in all honesty, should have come away with a win. A missed penalty and 2 tries disallowed because their own team through punches and through elbows and stuff. What are you doing? Stop doing that. You're hindering your own team. Discipline will be the big thing for them to take away from that game, I think, to me, just to help the rest of your team out. But they'll be looking now to bounce back from that. They are moving up. They can try and take this game, and I think this is a game they'll want to prove they can win. Obviously, with Wales coming up now next week as well, that's going to be a World Cup game. They're going to want to prove they can beat teams like England, like Wales, just to settle the nerves a bit leading up to that World Cup. So starting off in this front row, we've got Bell, Fainga, and Slipper. So, you know, this is a good front row for them. Is it? It must be quite a similar weight size to the England front row, but it's definitely going to be a big point of contention. Of course, they had their issues last week with losing a couple of tight heads from head injuries and from shoulder injuries and stuff. So big move for them, trying to make some recoveries now. They can't afford for their scrum to falter too much, but it's no doubt that's why Eddie Jones put on so many of the forwards. In the lock department, Arnold and Rodder, and then in the back three, Leota, Hooper, and Valentini, who had a quite good game actually. Michael Hooper, of course, the captain, as always. It's not necessarily the most capped team I would be expecting to see from this Australia side. They're certainly trying to influence some new players and get some lesser capped people in to get some more time. Nick White and O'Connor will be taking over now in that 9-10 department. Nick White having a couple of words with the ref last week. O'Connor, I don't think, is a terrible move. Apart from that one missed penalty, I think he had a pretty good game overall. Hunter Paisami and Ikatau in that centre partnership will no doubt be working the same as they did in that Scotland game. They both made good ground. They both made good work of it. And finally, that back three, we've got Wright, Callaway, and Curly Beale, who I think we'll want to forget last week. I don't think he had the best game. Interesting to have this switch up. I believe there's a couple of injuries in terms of that full-back position. People like Reece Hodge and stuff not in. So, you know, they've got to try and make do with what they have. I don't know if this is as strong as the England team. There's certainly strong people in here, but of course they're having to make some big adjustments and move around a little bit. So, going to be a testing game for Australia. And finally, as we move towards the end of the game here, we will talk about the Australian subs. So Tolu Latu, Tom Robertson, and Oliver Hoskins, who's going to be making a debut. What a time to make a debut against a pretty strong England side. It's going to be good luck to him. Will Skelton, the giant, will be coming on at some point, and Pete Samu, Tate McDermott, Noah Lolosio, who I'm a little bit 50-50 on Lolosio, but it'd be nice to see him getting back on the pitch. And finally, Isaiah Parise, who I believe I'm getting that pronunciation correct, who was quite impressive, in all honesty, in that Scotland game. I thought he had a really good game. Bit of a shame not to be starting, in all honesty. I quite liked the impact he had. Maybe that's the idea. Maybe he's much more of an impact player. I am still trying to learn a little bit more about the Australian team. So, unfortunately, there's a couple of people on this bench here I won't be able to get too into, as you may have noticed by how fast I've skipped over some of the people's names. But in terms of a score prediction, what do we think is going to happen in this game? Well, this game will be, like I said, a battle of the forwards. I think I would probably lean towards England for this one. That England forward pack looks to be a little bit more capped, a little bit more experienced, and just generally gelled together a little bit better. And I imagine so much of this game is going to come down to penalties generated from scrums, penalties generated from line-outs, driving maul, tries, things like that. I'm going to lean towards England, and I would be expecting England to make a bit of a stamp. It's no good beating Tonga by 50 if you can't beat Australia, so I think they'll want to put down a bit of a stamp. I don't think they'll be holding back. They'll be taking threes when they can get them, and any penalty they can get into that corner for the driving maul, I expect to be seeing them attempt the try. So I'm going to call England to win by, I'm going to say 15, and I think people might think that's outrageous. I think people might think of it to be under 5. I'm going wild, why not? But of course, guys, I am but one man talking nonsense about rugby on the internet. So if you think I'm wrong and you want to drop down your own prediction in the comments, feel free to. And who do you think is going to do bad? Who do you think we should be keeping a special eye out for in this game? I think it's going to be a fantastic weekend of rugby. We have already done one of these for the Scotland-South Africa game, so make sure to go check that one out. We are going to be doing one for every video that's going to be going on this week for all of the games that are happening over the Autumn Nations. So make sure to subscribe to the channel just to keep up to date with all the videos as they come out, and make sure to drop this video a like if you enjoyed it and enjoy this style of video. But I'll see you all next time, guys. Bye bye.